Welcome to the Maine Planning Basics webinar series. My name is Tom Mariola, and I'm a senior planner with the Municipal Planning Assistance Program at MOCA. These monthly webinars are intended for those that are new to the planning profession. A reminder that these sessions are recorded and posted on our website. I've already recorded links for your those of you that are AICP, your continuing education link, and the link to the Maine Planning Basics webinar. Our next session will be Friday, June 5th. We don't have a subject yet, so feel free to forward something along if you have some thoughts. We've been getting a lot of positive feedback very recently about some of these sessions, so looks like we're going to keep doing this for the time being. So we need a lot of sessions. We need a lot. We need a half a dozen at least to come up so we can fill the calendar for the remainder of the year. Today's topic is arts and culture integration with community planning. We welcome the program director for the Maine Arts Commission, Danielle Moriarty. She manages the state's Percent for Art program and leads placemaking and community development initiatives. Danielle has more than 15 years of experience integrating arts and culture into public life. Her career spans roles as a nonprofit leader, grant maker, educator, arts administrator, and practicing artist. She brings an understanding of how creative strategies can support rural communities. Danielle, thank you for joining us, and you can go ahead and begin.
Great. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here. I just want to start off with telling you a little bit about the Maine Arts Commission. There's this quote here by our governor, Janet Mills, that I think is a really great example of why arts and culture is such an important piece of our lives as communities, and not just individuals. And at the Maine Arts Commission, we really do believe that the arts are a powerful and an essential thread that connects us all across communities, cultures, and experiences. They're not merely an enhancement to our daily life, but truly a vital vehicle for community well-being, fostering belonging, healing, dialogue, and shared understanding. This is the foundation of our work. It's woven into every program we support, every partnership we cultivate, and every decision we make. From rural towns to urban neighborhoods, from classrooms to community centers, we're committed to ensuring that the transformative power of the arts reaches every corner of Maine and every person who calls it home. Today, we're not just talking about projects. We're really talking about how arts and culture can be integrated into planning systems at the local, regional, and state levels. So before we dive in, I want to start with a really quick activity. So I want you all to take a moment to picture your community from above, like a map in your mind. If it helps, you can close your eyes if you're comfortable doing so. So now imagine, instead of streets and buildings, imagine that you see pulses of energy and connection, the places where your community feels most alive. Where do people gather, celebrate, or express themselves? What spaces feel creative, welcoming, or full of possibility? Where do you sense silence, absence, or potential waiting to be activated? Notice what comes to mind for you, specific places, even sounds, colors, or even memories that hold meaning for you. Now think of just one place you pictured in your map that tells a story about your community's creative life. Maybe it's a piece of public art, a mural, a farmer's market, a park, or even an underused space that could be reimagined. If you'd like, go ahead and name that place in one word or phrase that captures its energy into the chat. I'd love to see what you're thinking about. No pressure though. So each of you here today plays a different role in shaping communities, whether it's at the local, regional, or state level. As we move into our discussion, I want you to keep this invisible map in your mind and consider how the arts can bring new energy, identity, and connection to the physical and civic spaces we shape every day. So Why arts and culture? I want to start by framing some of the impacts that arts have on community and economic development with a few fun stats. I love a good data snack. So the Maine arts and cultural sector was a 2.2 billion with a B industry in 2022. That's more than twice the lobster industry. Lobsters get a lot of credit, but really arts and culture are a heritage industry that needs to be kept alive within the state of Maine. Arts and culture are economic drivers and social infrastructure. For planners, that this often shows up in downtowns and public spaces at the local level. For regional planners, it shows up maybe in economic development strategies, shared identity across communities. And for those who are working on the state level, it might show up in policy, funding priorities, and long-term investment frameworks. But overall, this is about identity, belonging, and participation, not just aesthetics. So, I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, are already familiar with the term creative placemaking, but I want to ground us all in the same understanding of it. So creative placemaking is about embedding arts and culture into the planning processes and not just the outcomes. So oftentimes I think we end up thinking about the outcome first and not about the process. So it's really about process and not just product. It's not just about beautification, but it's about how creative strategies are embedded into things like comprehensive plans, regional strategies, statewide priorities. So what does this actually look like in practice? I'm going to provide some case studies and examples of what different communities in Maine are doing to integrate the arts. This will be like a little tour to Maine. And we will start in Portland, but don't worry, we're going to take a look at some other places around the state as well. So on the screen here, you can see Portland artist and playwright Marty Pottinger. She spent years working directly inside Portland city government, not in a gallery, but in City Hall, alongside police, fire, public works, and community members. Back in 2015, after a confrontation between police and a community member was escalating tensions, the police chief at the time reached out to Marty, asking if art could help reduce conflict. What followed from this conversation were original performances involving police officers and local youth that was then performed at Portland's high schools. And so that's reflected here on this called Forest City Times. A second project that Marty did brought together city councilors, the police department, housing authority, immigrant community leaders, and emergency medical service workers. And they came together to hold these monthly meetings that combined civic dialogue with art making. This led to the creation of temporary and permanent art in the form of poetry, benches, murals, and painted light poles, which are great for the physical infrastructure, but it really also was incredibly healing for the social infrastructure between all these groups. The National Endowment for the Arts selected this work as one of only 5 nationally featured creative placemaking projects across the country. So one of the key takeaways here in these examples is art isn't just decoration, and when it's rooted in communities' real life, its tensions, its pride, it becomes a really incredibly powerful civic tool. Next up, we are going to travel north to Belfast. So in 2005, the mayor and city council of Belfast was looking to repurpose its 1935 elementary school. And it encouraged a then much smaller arts organization called Waterfall Arts to expand from its home in Montville and establish a more robust art center in downtown Belfast. That decision to give a town-owned building a new life as an art center transformed Belfast's civic and creative landscape. Today, Waterfall Arts offers exhibitions, public art, open studios, the list goes on. Most recently, Waterfall Arts created a large-scale public art project called Here is Magic, which is a modular 32-panel mural in which over 30 local artists each completed individual reflective narratives on the theme of home. And this was all designed to highlight and celebrate the natural assets of Mid-Coast Maine. So the takeaway here is that communities often already have the infrastructure, they just need a new vision and partners. So Waterville's story shows what sustained intentional arts investment can produce in a small Maine city. Waterville Creates was established in 2014 by a core group of arts and cultural institutions that all shared the same belief that arts was more powerful in numbers and that it was important to strengthen community bonds and boost the economy. So what started as a collaboration between these organizations really turned into something much more. The Paul J. Schupf Art Center, which was an $18 million development building, which was done in partnership with Colby College, opened in 2022. And it is a 32,000 square foot community hub for visual and performing arts, film, and arts education. It's open to the public 365 days a year. And the results have been quantified. Waterville's nonprofit arts and cultural industry generated $13.5 million in economic activity in 2022. It generated $2.4 million in local, state, and federal government revenue, and the typical attendee spent $37 roughly per person per event, which did not include admission to any of the events. And 42% of attendees came out from outside of Kennebec County. 88% of respondents agreed the venue they were attending was a source of neighborhood pride for the community, and 87% said they would feel a sense of loss if it were no longer available. So the takeaway here is that arts investment produces economic returns that are incredible and measurable, and that community pride is really priceless. A decade ago, Biddeford was a struggling post-industrial mill city. We have plenty of those around the state of Maine. Today, it's one of the most talked about urban revivals in New England. It's been featured in the New York Times, Food and Wine, Netflix. So what changed in that 10 years? Arts and culture led the way. Bookstores and coffee shops have opened, former mill buildings have been reimagined, and creative enterprises have emerged on Main Street, resulting in one of the most vibrant urban areas in Maine. The organization Engine, which is a nonprofit arts center, helped catalyze this. They were founded on the belief that, quote, commerce follows culture, and that art in its fullest expression not only impacts individuals, but transforms communities. In 2022, Main Street America recognized Biddeford's downtown organization, Heart of Biddeford, with a Great American Main Street Award, honoring the community for its excellence in comprehensive preservation-based commercial district revitalization. So lots of incredible work that is happening here in Biddeford. And the takeaway for this community is that you don't need a Colby College or a major philanthropist to get started. Biddeford began with a small nonprofit, a vacant building, and artists who believed in their city. The investment followed the culture. Next up, we're going to go to Van Buren. Shout out to Luke Dyer, who I saw is on this call today. We're going to be talking about all the wonderful work that he's been doing there. So rather than defaulting to conventional development strategies, Luke did a wonderful job of asking different questions. How do we recreate our downtown? How are we conscious of our rich Acadian and French Canadian culture? How do we respect our community's incredible history? How do we incorporate arts and implement creative placemaking into that rebirth? So the answer came through Luke's bold combination of resident engagement, partnerships, and art-centered investment. I believe it was 2023, Van Buren applied to be part of the Citizens Institute for Rural Design, a program from the National Endowment for the Arts that assists rural communities in navigating design challenges. They became one of, I believe, only 17 communities across the US that were selected that year. So shout out to that great work. And that funding really helped identify community assets and allowed Van Buren to embark on cultural and environmental improvements. Part of that included a Acadian historic pathway, which featured art pieces and bricks from historic buildings, and really just set the stage for what was to come. On the public art front, Van Buren commissioned a project where a local artist is painting a postage stamp mural, as you can see in this image here. Small pieces come together to form one large picture representing Van Buren. Children are even painting what they want to see in their town's future, which I love. It's like tiny future city planners meets tiny artists all coming together in very young minds. One small tiny future planner / artist painted scooters on Main Street. Another drew the famous Muskie Fishing Derby. And through a Maine Arts Commission program called Maine Creates, a new project called With Love from Van Buren is going to be using collaborative design sessions and community feedback loops to have residents co-create mural panels celebrating the town. This process invites multi-generational participation and fosters pride, unity, and a shared connection. So this creative placemaking work didn't stop at murals and pathways. The momentum built by arts investment is now fueling the town's next chapter, which is a full community and small business incubator. The town is converting its formal municipal building into a community connectivity hub and small business incubator. And after working with Drexel University's students, art and design students, they will be creating pieces for the town's historic pathway. That was one piece of that project that they did with Drexel. So now a new group of graduate students will be brought in to design the building renovation. And the students are putting together incredible designs without having ever gone to gone to Van Buren. It's a long way for them to kind of get that aspect, but they are working alongside professional architects to ensure that they're meeting the correct standards. And these are just some examples of those renderings that students came up with. Additionally, these are designs that the students came up with for the interior, which are incredibly imaginative and also deeply community-centered, again, even though they never stepped foot in Van Buren. So featuring public meeting rooms, movable kiosks, community kitchen area, spaces for small businesses. The completed building will feature 10 business incubator spaces so that small ventures, small businesses can really get their business model up and running and sell their items without bearing the full burden of purchasing or renovating a building of their own, which is huge. And this is all, as I said, the takeaway here is that this is all based on, next slide, maybe. Arts and culture is a starting point for transformation. And so what changed everything here in Van Buren was a leader in the town who recognized the power of arts and culture, and that it wasn't just a massive developer coming in and saving the day, but it was a community that decided its culture and identity were the foundation of its future. We'll end our little tour to Maine and Norway. Norway has been quietly building one of the most compelling grassroots revitalization stories in the state, I think. It started with a falling down factory and 3 young Maine artists who didn't want to pay rent. In 2023, a nonprofit called Lights Out Gallery purchased 10 Tannery Street. You can see in this photo here, it's the building in the very foreground of the picture with the yellow doors and the and yellow accents. The building was once home to Tubbs snowshoes, which had once upon a time made Norway famous as the snowshoe capital of the world. Lights Out began converting this building into a space for a gallery, a dance studio, painter studios, and just additional working and display spaces. Co-founders and partners Reed McLean, Danielle Sipe, and Carly Woods, who are all Maine natives, launched Lights Out during the pandemic with a mission to provide really publicity and exposure to Maine artists. And then when it became apparent that these video interviews of Maine artists that they were doing were gaining a lot of attention, they started doing pop-up shows around the state, which was hugely successful and gave them a lot of connection and exposure to what they were doing back in Norway. And the renovation story is just as inspiring as the vision that these folks had. They've attracted hundreds of volunteers from the area and from across Maine. People drive there on their community volunteer days from an hour plus away. And they have had these people put in thousands of hours of work to help bring this vision to life. And the investment of this energy followed. So the nonprofit received a $20,000 grant from the Betterment Fund and a $230,000 grant from the Maine Department of Economic and Community Development. And the art scene extends beyond the building. So while the building itself is an incredible story, the Norway Maine Arts Festival has been part of the town's history since 1967, celebrating art and community through the Western Maine foothills. And in 2025, Lights Out took over stewardship of the festival, which has just really deepened the organization's roots in the community, and has really set the stage for more opportunities to come. I want to talk a little bit about another building in Norway that Lights Out is connected with. It's the Gingerbread House, which is located on Main Street in Norway. And it is was a dilapidated Victorian mansion, had been sitting empty and awaiting sale. Really just a gorgeous building, but hadn't really received any interest because it was in a bit of disrepair. In 2024, Lights Out sponsored its first artist residency program, and they invited 6 photographers to live and work in dialogue with the town of Norway and the Gingerbread House, and use the house as a way to respond in their work, but then also emphasize the community. So the 6 photographers that were selected were chosen for their experimental and relationship engaged work with the medium, and they were prompted to respond to the town, the house, and then their own artistic practice. The result was this exhibition called 36 Windows. You can see the young woman on the left holding up a flyer for the exhibition. And it filled this beautiful, but falling down building, the peeling parlors, the dark staircases and faded rooms with original work that was made specifically to respond to it. And the effect really was electric. The show drew visitors from across the region, all the way to Norway. Over 300 people came to Norway for the opening. And the building, very shortly after, subsequently sold. And the exhibition is widely credited as having brought renewed public attention and energy to that property during a critical time. The entity who purchased the building was there at that opening that day and saw the potential that was there because this exhibition and these artists were responding to it. So there's a really quiet but powerful purpose here, which is to let the community experience the building in its most alive state, really give it new life, and decide what should happen to it next. And that, I think, is a really powerful transformation to demonstrate that a vacant building given over temporarily to art can transform how a community sees its own possibilities. So that's exactly it. The takeaway here is that Norway's story is about what happens when artists are trusted as community development partners, not just performers or decorators, but builders. 3 young people with a vision, a derelict building, and volunteer weekends are now the stewards of Norway's signature annual festival and its new arts hub. So this is just a really inspiring story. So looking across all of these places, a few things are true for every one of these success stories. These patterns show up again and again, regardless of the size or geography, and that the most successful efforts are not isolated, but they line across all of the different levels of both local, regional, and state efforts. So they all started with what they already had. Belfast had a vacant school building. Biddeford had mill buildings. They involved the community from the beginning. They found a good partner. Nothing happens in silos. Partners are essential. And they were patient and intentional. None of this work happened overnight. It was long and hard, but it was worth it. So when looking at these types of initiatives and their successes, if they're focused on community rather than having the sole or primary focus of attracting outside tourists or visitors, implementations show, when they're successful, they show how art and culture can be a component of planning, land use, transportation, economic development, housing, infrastructure, etc. It's not just a luxury added on at the beginning of a planning process or even at the very end. It's a tool that should be used to help shape better outcomes for residents. So this is really where this work can become actionable. So I think the trick here is to start with, three things: engaging artists into planning, paying artists. Artists have a history of being not paid or underpaid, and building those partnerships. I would ask that you consider bringing these three questions, to your board, your committee, your staff, whoever, your planning meetings. And really think about how you can integrate and make actionable steps towards integrating arts into planning processes. And where you sit in your life and in your work really shapes how you do this work. But all three of these kind of roles are interconnected and can't exist without the other. So on the local level, it might be integration into local projects and engaging artists into comprehensive plans. The regional level, it might be providing technical assistance. And, the state might zoom out and really thinking about that cross-sector work and policy frameworks. A couple of tools and approaches, I've mentioned these in many of the examples that we looked at, but there are a number of ways that this can be seen in the type of work that we do. So asset mapping, is a really important one, and just understanding what is already there and what exists in communities. Artist residencies have an incredible amount of impact, as you saw with Portland. Marty Pottinger's work that she did with the city there. And creative engagement is, I think, an often underutilized one. In this picture here, you can see this is an artist working for Public Art St. Paul, where they're collecting data and community engagement with the public with a popsicle pop-up meeting vending opportunity. So soliciting information from the public, enticing them with a cold sweet treat, and all the while showing that public art can take many different forms. And temporary activations are always a really interesting and accessible way for communities to start in this process. That final image there is the Pinkies by Posey Moulton, which were in Portland and have since moved. So the Maine Arts Commission is already investing in this type of work. Launched in 2025, last year, we put forth the Creative Communities Grant, which is specifically for creative placemaking projects. The program funds arts-based projects that respond to community needs. And it's a small grant, and we hope to increase the funding amount as we continue to see its success. But state and regional partners play a critical role in making this work possible at the local level. So we're excited to see where this is going to go. I'll end on this quote, that this is a quote by the former chair of the National Endowment for the Arts, Dr. Maria Rosario Jackson. But really, I think that this captures the essence of what this is all about, that ultimately it's about integration and placing arts where they belong, which I believe is everywhere. And so this is really a perfect example of how we are able to really harness the power of the arts, and not just have them as a aesthetics or beautification aspect of what we do. And so I would encourage you all to think about what's one action you can take with you on this beautiful sunny Friday. What would be the most helpful to you to move forward? It could be small, but make it realistic. And that's really how this work begins.
Yeah, folks can open it up to questions. We have a lot of people on the call that probably have their own experiences with some of these items. You mentioned when we have there's at least 2 town managers on that I've seen. So I'm assuming that folks have a lot of stories from their own towns. But questions? Come on, questions for Danielle. I had one. I always have something, but mine was the property in Norway. The larger building for what you said snowshoes were made there once.
Yep.
Is that like a tax acquired building? I didn't see how that you mentioned about not wanting to pay rent, but so was there a building that was abandoned or tax acquired or?
Yeah, it was abandoned, and I'm not exactly sure the specifics on how they acquired it, but I'm pretty sure they got it for like an incredibly
Yeah,
low amount from the city or the town, and really wanted to at first kind of say like, oh, well, we need studio space, and we'll just buy this building, um, and and then it turned into something much, much more.
got it. Okay.
I have a I have a question. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, great. You mentioned sort of towards the end there, the key is integration. And I'm under the impression that in Maine there are, in some cases, very famous artists that live here at least part of the year. And I think that has been a thing for a while, that like Maine is known for some pretty famous artists, but I get sometimes the feeling that they're maybe doing their own thing, kind of in as it happens in Maine sometimes here, they're kind of in the woods doing their thing, and I'm wondering if you in your experience you find that what is the trickier part of that integration? Getting artists interested and coming out, especially if they're fairly established, to come out and show their work, or is it getting towns, exciting the towns to be receptive to that? What do you think is kind of the harder part of that equation?
Well, I think the root of that is relationship, right? And relationships are hard. So I think that
Yeah.
that's what it boils down to. I would also say that there's a big difference between a practicing studio artist who does just want to hole up in their studio and paint, and
Yeah.
that's wonderful. And
Yeah.
then there are community artists, right? Like who
Right.
want to create systemic change. And so I think the trick is finding the difference between those two. And what my experience is that most community leaders, whether in official or unofficial capacity, are very excited to implement this type of work. They're just not exactly sure how or who are the right artists to talk to, right? Like you don't maybe want to talk to that studio artist who just wants to be left alone.
Right.
And so I think that's the trickiest and hardest piece, is making sure that the right people are talking to each other and they're using the right language with each other, and they're building the right relationships there.
Interesting.
Okay. Isabel, go ahead.
Thanks. I had a question. I liked the example that you gave about the pop-up meeting with the popsicles, and I'm wondering if you or anyone else on the call has some specific ways to integrate art into like a participatory planning process. So really trying to get feedback. I liked the Van Buren examples and I liked that popsicle example. So anything else that you can think of?
Well, I would just say hire an artist in residence if you can. So if you want to integrate art into your planning process, bring artists into that conversation. Luke, you might hate me for this, but you were mentioned, so I don't know if you want to speak on your examples.
Yeah, I think so. Several years ago, I'll tell you a really quick story. Several years ago, I was on Facebook. I kept seeing this beautiful furniture. And every time I looked at it, I thought, holy crap, it's like Pottery Barn quality furniture. And after seeing this stuff like 3 or 4 times, I looked to see where the guy was from. He was from Van Buren, Maine. Never heard of him. Never even heard of the guy. So I ended up having a meeting with him, and I thought, you know what? I don't know who is in my community. And the only way to find that out, and I was a police officer here for 18 years. So I had a meeting of all artists in the community, promoted it to bring everybody together that was a creator, and just offered free food and brought people together. And once you bring those people together, then you can start creating the magic. And that's, what I would recommend. And that really is what started our pursuit of doing more arts work in our community, was that one little gathering that just brought people together that we didn't know existed in our community.
John, go ahead. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. To your point, Luke, I'm going back. I'm thinking about the last question that was asked, which is like, what do we think that we can do? Like as everyday people who may not be, artists or even necessarily town managers. And I feel like, in my mind, the answer is to like, well, when you can participate, like join, form somewhat of a critical mass, because I feel like there is something to that where they're a little bit contagious and self-fulfilling. Like when you have, once you have a group, then it's kind of easier for that group to get a little bigger and a little bigger. And I'd be curious to know your thought on that, if there's some way that could be fine-tuned.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's absolutely show up. I think also go to where the artists are, show up to an opening, meet with them, talk to them. I mean, that example with the gingerbread house in Norway, 300 people showed up to look at artwork together, just to look at it. And then a building was sold. I think there's real opportunity if you start making it happen and showing up in those spaces. There's a lot of different ways that can be really fruitful.
Jim.
Hi there. I'm one of the town managers. A little bit beat up from working with high school this morning on trails, but we've got the Haystack Mountain School of Arts. We've got a Deer Isle Arts Association. I think it's really made a difference for us. I've argued our economy has 3 legs. One is fishing, another is summer residency and tourism, and the third is arts. And they all, you hope, will fit together nicely. I'm not sure the fishing one tends to sometimes be more competitive than collaborative, and that's something we need to work on. I think though that the strength I'm seeing is not just the economic vitality, but I'm really intrigued with getting our kids involved in the arts more. And that's broadly written. We just got a kind of grant I never heard of before, a Music Drives Me grant. Got $97,000 worth of musical instruments for our school bands, and suddenly all these kids are playing music in a band, and that kind of engagement, I think, keeps people here longer. That's one of the challenges we have, is retention. We want them to feel like that's a place they want to live, especially if they go off to college, that they want to come back. And I'm curious, in that sense, it's not so much a building, because we don't have vacant buildings, but it's the people and some kind of networking that needs to happen to make the arts, really integrated in our future. I'm curious, because you've leaned a bit on the building, having the vacant space and art studios, but when you don't have those buildings, have you got artist associations like ours or schools like ours that you're working with?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of artist associations that we're connected with around the state. I mean, I hear what you're saying about how buildings aren't, the be all end all, but if you don't have a space for an artist to live and work, you don't have an artist, right? Like you're not building a community, if you don't have an affordable, and this is, I think, true, we're dealing with an affordability issue across everyone across the state. It's not just artists, but artists have also been dealing with this for a long time, of finding affordable places where they can live and do their work. And so if you don't have those, studio spaces, for instance, in a mill building, an artist may not have the ability to actually create their work. So I think they do go hand in hand. I think one aspect that the Maine Arts Commission has been really trying to make moves in is really connecting all these different groups of artists across the state. So Maine is a really big, small state. It's spread out. We have artists in every corner, but they don't always talk to each other and know that what each other is doing. And so our role at the Maine Arts Commission is really to make sure that we are a good connector and providing opportunities for them to network, but also opportunities for them to create their work. We do that through our grants and through other initiatives, but we're always looking for other ways where we can ensure that there's good creative workforce development here, again, retaining artists to stay here. Even if they're like those summertime artists, what can we do to encourage them to stay longer? So it's a big beast, but it's an important one. Also, congrats on the $97,000.
I could respond, and it's maybe my bias. I have professional artists in my family, but I'm really leaning on the amateurs, the community theaters, the community bands, the arts associations of people. They may be retirees, but they like making art, and that makes Deer Isle a very attractive place to live and work. And so I guess it's a different dimension. Instead of going for professionals, is going for amateurs and making life richer for the people who are here.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Those are the people who, no shade to Jamie Wyeth, but like he's the one who's, the heart and soul of what happens here day to day in Maine in terms of the arts and cultural ecosystem. It is those people that you're describing, the folks who are committed to their work, and regardless of whether it's making them money or not, they're committed to the craft and to the creation of art, which is incredibly important to not only making, as Fred Kent says, making our communities not just livable but lovable.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else from anyone? Okay. Well, this has been great. I'm going to post, I apologize, Danielle, for this, but I'm going to post your contact info in chat.
That's fine.
So just because, there's not many places to go for these types of questions. I think you guys are it. I don't know where I'd begin.
You begin with
all
us.
Right. Yeah. So, and you're moving soon, I heard you say. So, right? Or
we are. Well, we're moving back to our original home, which is just across from the Blaine house. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Danielle. This has been great. Completely, I believe, new topic for me ever. And thanks to Aaron Zerkowitz, Yarmouth Program Director, for setting up the AICB credits link. Yes, reminder, our next webinar will be on Friday, June 5th. Please send us any suggestions for future topics. And if there's nothing else, everyone have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thanks all.